Hi everyone, welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs.
That was a dramatic pause.
I thought I'd try it. I thought I'd just sort of keep it there.
Feel alright? Feel good?
Yeah, I'm alright, yeah.
Nice.
Fine, yeah. My name is Fazz, and I'm fine. Yeah, I'm really good. So yeah, you okay? Who are you?
I'm Rich, and I was literally just asking to see if that delivery felt like what you were going for.
No.
No? It's all right.
I thought it'd be better than that.
In too deep now.
Yeah. I wanted more.
The important thing is you tried.
I know. Well, I just thought I'd just try and, freshen up the start like a bit. I feel a bit like a con artist when we say we're a retro gaming podcast when some of the games we review aren't retro gaming at all, or what people would expect to be. Certainly, I know we'll keep coming back to this conversation, have it all the time, but a lot of people are like, oh, it's 15 years, or oh, it's definitely not PS3 on Wii. That's how they sound, by the way, in my mind. So I
haven't been on the internet for a while, so
don't.
Just don't.
Just don't. But anyway, so I don't want to change the tagline because I like it.
Yeah.
Because it flows now, and I'm used to saying it. And if I change it, I'll get it wrong. But also, we probably cover our fair share of games to be classed. Is it like a Class A drug will probably have to be ground up to
So we've just been cut.
Our
content has been cut with more modern stuff.
Yeah, exactly, like glass.
Yeah.
We're just like a bad drug. Much like the ice slushies that we've just received from the shopkeep.
Have you forgotten how to go outside?
The problem is I've come out the door. So we bought some Tango Ice Blasts from the shop, which are half price and £2 and taste amazing.
Unfortunately, between this and my shorts, this is the most like Bart Simpson I've felt for a very long time.
I was trying to do a Bart, some sort of a funny Bart thing without doing the cowabunga, which is from 1991 Bart. It's in a more recent Bart, but I don't know one.
So you've managed to conjure up a glorious deconstruction of a joke, so well done.
Thanks. But yeah, what flavour's yours? Raspberry and mango, I think.
Yeah, it's nice, fruity.
I've got cherry and chocolate, which it just tastes like cherry. I don't know if there is chocolate in there.
I'm really struggling to get my head around the notion of an icy drink slush thing that tastes of chocolate.
I kind of do get a bit at the end.
Yeah.
I don't know when this podcast turned into reviewing slushies from the shop.
Well, we're here now. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's as good as any other part of the podcast that we've done previously. So, I'm semi-proud of it.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, no, I'd score this highly. I'm not going to give it an arbitrary score. It doesn't deserve,
You sound like you want to.
Yeah, I do. An 8. It's getting an 8. It's getting an 8.
Yeah, nice.
It's really good. I'm quite happy with the Tango Ice Blast. So, apart from murdering our own podcast, what have we murdered recently? We murdered Sonic the Hedgehog recently.
Oh, yeah.
In a game, the murder of Sonic the Hedgehog, and also I kind of asked them to stop making Sonic games. Trying to murder Sonic games in general. So then it makes sense that 4 podcasts later we would go back and review more Sonic games.
Return to the scene of the crime.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Like sickos. So you've been looking at the Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 for the Sega Master System.
Yep.
By popular demand of 2 people on our Instagram that I know from Discord.
Still counts.
Yeah, I know. It's more demand than we've ever had before.
Way!
So, we will take it. So we're going to be looking at that. And then I realised that I had to go back and undo something that I undid in the first place, which is to do with Locoroco.
Does this mean you have to redo it?
Yeah, well, it's a bit weird, really. What? So, I basically, I'll explain myself, shall I? So
podcast retro some needs.
Yeah, this is the retro part of the podcast. So last year, episode 12, we went to Slam Dunk, which we brought this time last year actually, and we were asking each other about our favourite games.
Yeah.
And I said Locoroco was my favourite game for the PSP, and gave it strong-armed myself using my own arbitrary scoring rules into a 10 out of 10. then I said at the time that I'd played the game recently and enjoyed it, and I went through the reasons that I enjoyed it, and pretty much gave like a sort of 5-minute review on the podcast. Then skip to December when we did our 2023 retro rating via score rank. So basically, within the score bracket, I'm trying to explain this. I know you know because you were there, but people might not have listened.
No.
And so every bracket of scoring we did with our arbitrary scores, we then ranked those games within that bracket. And Locoroco fell within the 10 out of 10 bracket along with Castlevania and Football Manager, Championship Manager, I think it was. Championship Manager from Paddy, and then also Escape from Monkey Island, I think it was.
One of the Monkey Islands.
One of the Monkey Islands, yeah. But then during that podcast, I forgot that I then sort of lowered Locoroco out of the conversation, but kept it in the top 4, that is because it was a 10 out of 10 game to me. But then I realised that during that podcast, now I realised it, that I thought I hadn't played it. I misremembered that I hadn't played it. That I'd played it.
Right.
And then I for some reason afterwards took it completely out of our scoring system because I thought I hadn't played it, therefore it wasn't fair for it to be in the scoring system. But I had played it.
Right.
So it needs to go back into the scoring system. And I also played Locoroco 2 recently because I said I was going to, because also during that podcast I said that I'd heard Locoroco 2 was better than Locoroco 1. And I'd never really played it that much. I'd kind of dabbled with it when I had a PSP the first time round, but I hadn't played it since. So that's the position I'm in with my kerfuffle that I made of my own volition because I'm an idiot.
So what we're saying is that this episode, if we are going for a loose theme, it's like unfinished business.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah.
Right.
Which sounds ominous, and it is.
It does.
Yeah, and it will be.
Wow.
So, where do we start? Like, as in, do you want a Rochambeau like we have done in previous times and see who wants to go first on unfinished business? So, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, you see, I did it your way that time.
I'm sorry.
The important thing is it was a draw.
It was a draw.
Right.
1, 2, 3.
Let's see right. Are we going on 3? You know what? Sod it.
This is great podcasting again. Yeah, no, I would. I thought we go 1, 2, 3 and then draw. That's how we do it.
That's
how we've always done it. We've always done it really well. I'm surprised we failed this time round.
No,
we screwed up.
My mistake. I went too early twice. That's fine. I can own that. If you're still listening, well done. Unlocked.
Jesus, it's like 8 minutes of shit. So
can you tell these are unscripted?
My word. Locoroco 2. So, Locoroco 1. I'm reinserting it back into the scoring.
Right.
But not at 10 out of 10. I'm going to pop it back in at 9 out of 10. And the reason for that will become clearer, hopefully. Are you looking at your ice blast because you can't get it up your straw anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is fucking bullshit. These straws are terrible. So, yeah, the reason for that is it'll probably come a bit more clear towards the end of Locoroco 2 as a review, really. But I still love Locoroco 1.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm still in love with it, but there was just a couple of things that I was like, oh, Locoroco 2's made me feel this way about the first game almost, and then just a little bit lesser.
Yeah. All right. A slight revision.
Yeah, exactly. So this will be the third time I talk about that game. So, I'm, if anything, really unoriginal is what I am. So, but Locoroco 2 then. So, is it better than Locoroco 1? No, is the answer. Is it terrible? No, it's a really good game. It's just a very strange situation.
Right.
So the idea of Locoroco 2 is that the games is pretty much exactly the same. Like the idea, so you have your PSP in front of you and you use your shoulder buttons to roll your Locoroco around the screen, around the levels, and you can, on this, do a couple of different things you couldn't do on the previous game. So there's more content there in terms of interactivity with the actual game, but there's less content in general because there's only 20 levels on Locoroco 2 versus 36 levels on Locoroco 1.
Right.
So the idea is that Bon Mucho, who is the leader of the bad Muja people.
You could have told me anything.
Well, it doesn't matter. I believe I've told you the right thing. Bon Mucho, he is pissed off that he didn't conquer Locoroco world in the first game.
Well, you would be, wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. You know these little blobs going about their lives, living serenely and happily, and they look like they live in some sort of sewerage planet.
Living La Vita Locoroco.
Yeah, nice. And yeah, so they're pissed off. They want to eat all the Locoroco again. So they come back to the Locoroco planet, and they seem to be singing an evil song that then kills off all the... I want to put in sort of, like, inverted commas, animals? That is in, like... Because there's more than Locoroco live on this planet. There's lots of different weird animals and creatures that live on this planet as well.
Entities.
Yes, pretty much. Like they just seem to... There's random shapes with smiley faces on them, but not smiley when the Muja come and eat them. But apart from that, you're effectively just in this exact same game. You are a Locoroco blob. You collect more Locoroco as you go through each level. It's a collectathon, so you can collect Locoroco. You can collect the other little people who are not Muja. They're Kuja? I think they are. Maybe they're something. Yeah, whatever. Who gives a shit? No one's got no one's going to hold me accountable for this.
If he's wrong, get in touch.
And so. And you collect lots of different little like flying bits, and it's really weird. It's this collectathon, and I think I said this about the first game where it's quite a expansive game in so much that there's a lot to collect, but you're not collecting it for anyone else but yourself. Now, I've been critical of collectathons before because I've been a bit like, well, you're collecting things, and what are you actually collecting them for? This. And I probably should be like, well, actually, I should hold myself a bit more accountable because Locoroco is a collectathon. But it is kind of like all inclusive. It's like almost like you're not really collecting for anything other than just doing the level a couple of times over.
Right.
And if you enjoy being in that world, it's not a bad thing. I'm definitely speaking out two sides of my mouth there, but I'm protecting Locoroco with one side of it. So you've got 20 levels, so there's less to do, but it's very much the same. An example of things that are different. So at one point during the level in Locoroco 1, you run into a creature, and if you've collected enough Locoroco, then you can then do a lovely song and dance for them. Do 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 do, and then that unlocks one of these collectibles. Right. That is in, and that's right. Okay, fair enough. That's fine. So whereas in Locoroco 2, you do the exact same thing, except during that time when you sing the song for them and dance for them, you have to do a sort of like proper rapper style, hit the right notes at the right time to then release that. So it becomes you have to collect the Locoroco, and you also have to do a sort of a button pressing exercise. So they do add that in. Your Locoroco can get around the level in different ways, so you can go in water this time. And actually, I think about this, and I think I might have said this in Donkey Kong Country, and I was thinking about this in a few different games where I find that water levels, Sonic, for example, like a bit shit. Whereas actually Locoroco, they're fine. So I remember reading a review at the time, recently when I was just sort of researching around this, and there were people saying, "Oh, the water levels are shit," and I was like, actually, if you look at other games, these are actually pretty okay. That isn't quite inoffensive. They're quite easy to do.
Yeah.
So they add that into it. You can separate your Locoroco like you have been able to previously when you've got them in a big blob, and then you can press a button and separate them out, and there's like different cracks in levels now where actually you can squeeze through things a little bit more, so they just add a few more different chambers you can get lost in compared to the first game.
Got you.
And then they also add in like a rolling mechanism as well, so you can jump inside like these little weird afro creatures, and you end up with an afro on top of your Locoroco ball, and it helps you. You said that so with such disdain. You're like, right.
Like, I just wonder if there was a Locoroco 3. I can't remember off the top of my head, and if they would just like add in more hairstyles.
There was. It's a Midnight Carnival one. I think it is, because there was Locoroco Correccio, which was the PS3 sort of screensaver thing, which is about 40 minutes worth of playing. But that's weird because you actually don't control the Locoroco. You control a butterfly that can only do this pulse that basically attracts Locoroco to you, and they get stuck on an airstream and they follow you round, which is like that's there you go. Quick blasting review of Locoroco Correccio. 5 out of 10. Fine.
Cool.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's all right for a PS3 sort of free thing. That was like an early PS3 sort of idea, wasn't it? Where it was like, oh, we've got no content. Shit.
Something, anything.
Quick, get Locoroco in. So yeah, and there's just a little bit more going on in the levels. That is, you can interact with the creatures a little bit more when you bump into them. Like there's like little sort of like monkeys that you can grab by the tail, etc. But in general, it's very much the same. So this is a really quick review because there's not much more to say than what I'd already said about Locoroco.
Yeah.
It's still incredibly charming. It's still got fantastic music. It still looks great. It still plays amazingly in so much that it has the simple control system. And I think that's why I was so infatuated, and knowing from doing this podcast like over the last year and a bit, like as in that's what I've really gravitated towards, something that has a simple control system, but actually the game is quite intricate with that. Just makes it
does a lot with it.
Exactly, yeah. It just makes it user friendly, especially on the PSP, which obviously I've lamented countless amount of times now, where actually the harder the controls are on the PSP, the less you enjoy the game. Whereas Locoroco just sticks to the simple stuff, and Locoroco 2 carries that on as well. So it does all the right things that Locoroco 1 does in the exact same way. It's just got less levels, but it has got a bit more interactivity in those levels. But I still find it a bit of a lesser return than Locoroco. And I think the reason is because it is just the same. That is, it is a continuation of that first game, which then makes me think in my head, I'm like, well, but why would I not want more of the exact same thing that I was absolutely in love with? Do you know what I mean? Like, as in,
it sounds from what you're saying like the kind of thing that if you had fast forwarded a few years and released it a little bit later, it would come out as DLC, maybe.
Yeah,
like
possibly
an expansion rather than a sequel.
I think it kind of would. Yeah, I think it probably would have been exactly that. I think that in the days it was released in 2009, this was really sort of 3 or 4 years after Locoroco, and it's like, but you kind of go, well, nothing's moved on at all. Do you know what I mean? Like, as in, whereas I think, yeah, you're right. I think nowadays you would have paid, I don't know, well, you probably pay the same amount as a full game, but it would be, within a year of Locoroco coming out, they would be just on it and be like, all right, well, we've got the same engine, we'll just drop it in there. So yeah, it was definitely a weird experience for me, because I was like, I find myself really enjoying this game still, but I would be scoring Locoroco 2 like an 8 out of 10, rather than Locoroco as a 9. And now, the reason I dropped Locoroco down a little bit was just because I think that I've said this about Locoroco, and I kind of said this as a positive thing, but actually I think it's actually a bit of a negative thing, that you can only ever really imagine yourself playing these games on a PSP. That is in, so I know they've been remastered for the PS4 and they'll be in the PS Store now. But it just feels so geared towards the PSP with that simple system and stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I can't imagine sitting down with a full controller, watching a 52-inch TV or whatever, like is in playing Locoroco.
Ultra HD,
yeah, it just
really get those curves.
Yeah, it just feels like it is just that experience. It feels like the perfect sitting on the bus, sitting on the train, play that game specifically in that circumstance, and you'll feel great about it. If you sat at home and like, oh, I need this on the TV, you're like, I think you probably would be a bit like, well, this is average, it's fine. So yeah, that's what I've decided. That's why it comes down from a 10 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10 Locoroco. And yeah, and I guess that I just wanted to kind of get a steer really from you as well, and it might happen at the Sonic games maybe, where it's like, what do we actually want from our sequels? Do we want the same thing? Or do we want a completely different thing, which actually then tries to take a risk, but can flop really badly because you're like, this is nothing like the first game. Fuck off. So yeah, I feel like I don't know what I want. I'm like a 5-year-old with a slush.
So without giving it too much thought, where I kind of come down on it personally, in very broad strokes, and it is very broad strokes, is it kind of depends on how established a franchise is or isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So if the first one comes out, is really, really fun, I would happily have more of that, please and thank you.
Yeah.
If, like with Sonic, it's been around quite a while, it's done lots of the same stuff, please and thank you, I kind of want it to start to spread its wings a little bit and try something new.
We can. Sorry, I'm just dropping slush everywhere. It's just like the straw doesn't work. Why would you give us a paper straw?
Maybe we should get some spoons.
I think later we'll spoon up.
As it
that
were.
sounded weird. Yeah, I think we said as much at the end of the Sonic podcast 4 podcasts ago, where we sort of... I'm so sorry.
No, it's all right. I work at this desk and you're getting slushy all over it. But that's fine.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, fuck you. So... Yeah, I think we said so as much at the end of the last podcast that you said, when I said, let's stop making Sonic games, you were like, well, the only thing that I would say would be to keep doing something completely different with it.
It was like a palate cleanser.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of goes the other way. Like, you can have a series that's been around a long time, but they haven't had that many mainline entries and stuff like that. I think, again, more of the same in that particular case is valid. I don't think there's necessarily a one-size-fits-all answer, but I do think that in most series there comes a point where you do start to need to mix it up, and then the trick is just at what point do you do that. I mean, there's a bunch of games that would try something completely different with each entry, and doesn't always work and all that kind of stuff. So, it's a difficult thing to gauge, and I think if you get lightning in a bottle and sales are through the roof and it's clearly really, really popular, then I can see why anybody would think twice about doing anything radically different.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've always wondered, if you're working on a series that, say, does take off early and does really, really well over a sustained period, and you're one of the creative people in charge, do you not get bored?
Mm-hmm.
And I think so it's all right for me to sit here and go, well, if I was in that situation, I'm never going to be in that situation. But
if I was a game developer,
I can't help but think that were it me personally, after, I don't know, however many entries of the same old, I would be getting bored. I would want to try something different. And it would be nice to have more people in the industry feel they can do that. But
it's weird, though, because I swear, I think I have a memory where Locoroco 2 was kind of like one of the last games I bought for the PSP before I traded the PSP in. And I'm not saying it was the reason that I traded the PSP in. That's not the case. But I think I remember feeling like I didn't play much of it because I was like, it's kind of the same. I think I got like 2 levels in. I was like, nothing's changed. And I was like, and then that's when I was like, is the PSP destined to be this thing where actually nothing good you'll have one glut of games. Yeah, do you know what I mean? You'll have one glut of games, maybe like 2005, 2006, 2007, and it's like everything's the same. And I probably missed out, and that has been evident on some of the games, like, for example, Final Fantasy Tactics and stuff. There's been, Daxter. There's been games that I missed out on the first time around because I let it go too early. But for a period of time, say 2008-ish, start of 2009, there was probably a period where I was like, we're just doing the same thing over and over on the PSP. And I'm like, is it something? And I guess that's probably a wider conversation about gaming as well, is like those little cycles of when does that innovative thinking come back round, and does it come back round quick enough, and is it what you want? It's almost like...
There's definitely something to be said for the indies and providing that little injection of innovation and stuff like that versus your big AAA releases and stuff like that. And I mean, there's a whole thing there to unpick at some point.
It's massive in the news at the moment, isn't it? Obviously, that everyone seems to be saying about. It seems to be that it seems to be evident, and as of we with our world exclusive Ollie Ollie World Rad Edition review, we killed a franchise last week. So and a development studio.
About that, if I'm being honest.
So he's sucking away at his slush. You are Bart Simpson. You're a bad boy. There is a place for that in the industry because of the fact that The thing I'm thinking of, I'm going to cut myself off there, is like God of War, for example. I've known, as I've stated on the podcast before, I've only played the PSP version of God of War. I've never played any others. But I note, as a gamer, that the God of War series has rebooted itself in a different vein. That is in, but that's been round. Like, it's almost that they've done a really, I'd say, a good job from their point of view, really, in terms of reviews and stuff, of going, we've had our God of War series, we feel like we've got to the end of it, we've probably done the same sort of thing. We're going to do the same thing again, but tweak it enough to be completely different and refreshing for people. And that's almost like, that sounds like quite a good system to do over a 25-year period or whatever it's been.
I think that's a good way of doing it. And I mean, I'm not a massive fan of the God of War games, but I have mucked about with them. So I knew enough to know that when I played the kind of rebooted one, why it felt different. And I think that's exactly the kind of like creative, maybe not risk in their case, but like I'd like to think that it was a relatively safe bet what they did. But that is, I think, still a good way for a big studio to do these kinds of things with their games and their characters and their themes and their world and all that kind of stuff. Because, they had a bit of a hiatus and then came back with a bit of a different spin and it's suddenly interesting again. And the storytelling kind of grew up in that time as well. And
that's a good point.
I think it helped a lot.
Oh, cool. So that was, I just kind of had a bit of a sort of thought process, a bit of a breakthrough, as we kind of do in the podcast, where we play something and go, I feel this way now about this game. And after playing a sequel or playing, or playing that game again, or, like reading more around it and stuff. And that's what the pod's really good for me personally, like, as in, and I hope people listen and enjoy it as well, where you kind of go, like, as in, that's good, and maybe go and have a look at that again, or feel that way about something again. It's great to kind of do that retro thinking.
Look at it through a different lens.
Yeah, exactly. And you're a different person as well than you were 20 years ago. So fatter would be that. Not you, me. Jesus.
Well, I think I am.
Just come in to like insult people. So let's swiftly move on to Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2, the Sega Master System. I know nothing about this game, these games, apart from the fact that they're 8-bit. That's it. That's all I know. So take it away.
So I had not played these before, but as we've kind of mentioned in passing, I've been starting to dabble with the old Master System a little bit on and off. So when the mention of them came up, I looked at it and was like, actually, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. Let's give it a go. So I know we never normally cover like how we're playing these things beyond broad strokes, right? On XYZ console or whatever. In this case, I am going to have to go into a little bit of detail for a reason that will become apparent.
I'm aroused. Carry on.
So I have a
brain freeze before you start. My word. The tongue to the top of the mouth thing works,
Is it? Yeah. Brain freeze?
Yeah. Do you get brain freeze?
Occasionally, not at the moment.
I get it quite regularly because I just wolf everything down. And I've got it right now. It's hurting. And but the tongue to the top of the mouth, definitely recommend.
So did you write out?
Yeah.
All right, nice.
9 out of 10. Tongue to top of mouth.
Not adding that to the spreadsheet. So, I have a Mega Retron HD. So it's basically a clone console of a Mega Drive. Hyperkin made it, but it's got region switches on the bottom, so you can go between PAL, America, Japan. You can play all of them, all that kind of stuff. So it took me an absolute age to work out whether or not I would be able to play Master System games on this thing, because on the full fat Mega Drive you have like these adapters you can get, and it's dead easy. And there was one that I looked at. Like the first version of one of these converters. And it was this big, chunky, round thing. And I was finding these videos of, people pulling them apart online and rewiring them and getting things to work that way. I was like, that's a lot of effort, right? And I can't find any conclusive evidence to say that any of these converters will work on this thing. And then I found out that they had made a sort of version 2. and it like I couldn't find anything on the internet about this frigging thing, like to actually say if it would work with a clone console by Hyperkin in 2024. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be cashing in some of my games down at CEX or something like that anyway. I'll pick it up, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It works. Yeah, like it actually works.
We've got a podcast. It would have been a short one if you were like, "Oh no, it didn't work."
Well, this is the thing, because I did this before the request for Sonic came in. Yeah. So when the request came in, I was like, "Yes, I can do it. Actually make this happen."
I am a Master System now.
So the reason I mention all this is that the console itself uses HDMI, right? When you are using this Master System converter, you can't switch regions if you're playing it through the HDMI, but you can if you're playing it through blurry old AV.
Okay.
So the reason this matters is that some Master System games in PAL territories and stuff like that were not necessarily running at the speed they should. So music could sound slower, or things might not quite line up on the screen. Say, I heard like, the words there's all sorts of like oddities that could come about if various things aren't running at the speeds the cartridge or the ROM, whatever, reckons it should be.
Yeah.
So the reason this matters is that I know the person that or one of the people that was mentioned about playing these used to play them when they were a kid. I don't know if you were playing it on a PAL system or not. I'm assuming you were. So it may have been that the music was slightly different and all that kind of stuff. So when it comes to like latency of inputs and responsiveness of characters and stuff like that, particularly with this Hyperkin console, sometimes it can be a little bit iffy with stuff. So with all that in mind...
You're really selling it here.
Well, the point is that, you know, the games do feel good to play, but I was playing them in an American mode through AV. Yeah. So if you were playing it on a PAL system back in the day, you might remember it as being a little bit sticky, I guess. A little bit slow, a little bit almost like a kind of muddy kind of controls, depending on the game. Yeah. If it's been, you know, optimized properly, then you won't notice anything. It'll be fine because you'll be playing it on the TV that'll matches and everything's good. So yeah, that's a bit of a caveat on the technical front, because certainly with Sonic 2, I was encountering quite a few bugs.
Right.
And I did have that moment of, is it the console? Is it the converter? Is it the general setup? Is it the game itself? So I wanted to mention all that because a couple of the other bits that I get to later on, it might be the cause.
It's important to caveat that though. Because
I think so.
And it's really good to get into that as well, because I'm always interested in the little tinkering that you do with certain things and stuff. So it's good to know how that works.
Oh shit! I just wanted to see if it would happen, and lo and behold, it worked.
It's on. It's fucking on.
Yeah, basically
the TV.
The other reason I mention all this is when I did the Alex Kidd review. That was on the re-release that was on Switch, so it had save states and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I have realised, going back to these, because these are old school proper cartridges, peacetime has made me weak.
He's got a soft underbelly.
At best, I was able to get through about half of each of them.
Which is fair.
So if you combine them, I would argue that I have played a complete Sonic game over the last fortnight or so. But as it is, so like, you're going to have to bear that in mind when I get to scores and stuff like that. It is not a complete playthrough and all that. And for that, I apologise. So, all that out of the way, Sonic 1, it looks like Sonic, sounds like Sonic. I really like how the Master System has, like the sounds that the Master System puts out. Like there is just something like really like warm, I guess. Like I really like the sound effects and the tunes that you can get out of a Master System compared to the NES. Like there's just something about the NES that to my ear sounds a bit like sharper almost. And I've no idea if that's actually the case or if that's just how I'm listening to it. But there's just something about it. And I was sitting there going like, oh yeah, this is nice. I did some digging, and are you familiar with Yuzo Koshiro at all? So the composer who did a lot of Sega stuff back in the day in the arcades and stuff like that. You would be familiar with his work if we.
I'm sure I would, but I'm one of these people that when I read Retro Gamer, for example, like I will see it'll be like, oh, the famous Japanese composer, and I'll be like, you know, I'm like, not even that. It's just so inaccessible for me because you'd say that when you read so much about retro gaming, you try and imbibe as much of it as you have in the last, say, 5 years as I have in terms of like try and crash it all in. You're like, oh, I can't tell one composer from another. Do you know what I mean? Like, sort of like, you know, like as in just have to take it as what it is.
So the reason I mention him is that I was sitting there going like, oh yeah, this sounds good. And I had a quick look at who developed it. And it's worth having a look on Wikipedia. It's one of those like interesting if true kind of stories. Yeah. And I'm not going to go into great detail here because it is worth looking up. But basically, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, Sega had been working with Yuzo Koshiro for a while, and they had this hit Sonic game on their hands, and they started thinking about trying to make a port on the Master System, and he basically offered to do it for them. Oh. Slight problem being that he was a composer that had never made a game before. Yeah. Sega wouldn't work with couldn't work with an individual for whatever reason, like contractually, so he ended up setting up a games development company.
What?
With his mum and his sister.
No way, that's so cool.
The first person he hired was the person who coded the Master System version of Sonic 1.
Which would make sense. But I need a guy.
Yeah, but also would kind of explain why the audio is quite good on it if it's a composer who's like put all this stuff together.
There's one thing I need to get fucking right.
yeah, exactly. Got one job.
It's the chip tune.
So, yeah, to look at it and to hear it, it sounds good. Obviously, if you then go and play the 16-bit version next to it, which I did, you realise how much of a generational leap that was. So yeah, like the fact that they managed to get as close to Sonic 1 as they did on the Master System is genuinely impressive. But there are some big limitations to the system. So, you know, the old Sonic trick of, you know, if you get hit, your rings go everywhere. On this, you drop one ring and you can't pick it back up.
Didn't you say that about which? I can't remember.
So there was a Sonic Chaos I played before where you drop like maybe 3 rings or 5, depending on how many you've got, but you can pick them up. On this, you can't.
I would be so shit at this. I need to pick up the rings again. It really
ups the difficulty. Like, in fact, you know, Sega, if you're listening and you want more ideas for what to do in future Sonic games, like this is the kind of shit you pull, right? Give that as an option, you know, toggleable option for like making it bastard mode. And off you go. There's an auto-scrolling level at one point as well, which feels really weird.
That is odd, isn't it?
So, like, you know, Sonic, got to go fast, but you can only go so fucking fast when the level's, like, not keeping up.
Oh, escalate it.
And like I said with Sonic Chaos, actually, they're across both games, they are very much prone to those kinds of leap of faith, like, gotcha kind of trap moments where it happens to you once, you lose your shit, you throw your controller out the window, you regroup, you go again, you kind of learn it, like an arcade game. What really threw me as well is there are checkpoints in this, but they're in like power-up boxes, like the rest of the like invincibility or whatever. And I don't have a manual with these, so it took me an absolute age to realise that power-up that I accidentally missed was actually a checkpoint, and I should probably make damn sure I get it. Talking of power-ups, actually, like I think quite early on, there's this. It might even be the first level. You can get like an invincibility and a speed up power up at the same time, and they kind of stack. So you get one then the other. But it makes the music and everything like that go absolute fucking batshit. Like it goes absolutely nuts. And so I don't know what other combinations of power ups you can get to stack. But it's things like that where when you know how it was put together, you look at it and you go, but is this just kind of inexperience in design rather than anything else?
It's going to be like, on the Master System, we've got this different feature. It's like, but by accident, though. Completely by accident.
Exactly. And it's all that kind of stuff where it's it just feels like it's a victim of inexperience, really. So like another one, in fact, you get these levels with like bridges that kind of slope upwards, and Sonic can't walk up that slope. He has to run. So if you get caught out and you end up on that slope standing still, you have to jump to finish the slope. Like you can't start walking uphill. Like it really, really gets thrown. And it's all those sorts of things where it just feels a little bit off. There are some bits that I like though, like there's these the spinning signs at the end. They almost work like a kind of roulette type thing where depending on
I think I've seen that before.
The sign you get, you go to a bonus stage. So it's kind of a luck of the draw type thing about whether or not you can go in and get some like one-ups and continues and stuff like that. From the bonus stages. And they've still managed to work in the fact that he'll like impatiently tap his foot and stuff like that.
Got it. He's got character. So he's got heart. That little blue shit.
My wife was watching me play this and was like, and said about how it was like character building. She said how difficult it was, and said like, oh yeah, I guess you sort of learn to fail with these things, don't you? I was like, actually, yeah, like there's some good life lessons to be learned here. So yeah, like it's there's a lot to be impressed by, but it is a bit rough around the edges. Then you get to Sonic 2, which came out about a year later, but was by a different developer who I checked. Like I think they're called Aspect. And again, assuming I've done my research right, which considering I was doing it about 10 minutes before you turned up is a 50-50 chance at this point.
We have to, so no one's going to stop you at this point.
Well, I think they did a couple of Game Gear games before they did this.
Yeah, right, okay.
Now, Game Gear and Master System were apparently very similar to develop for, if not basically the same. So that experience, that difference of just even having a couple of games under your belt before you go and try and make a Sonic game, really shows through. And so like the level design flows much better. Like it still has a couple of the odd sort of gotcha traps and stuff like that, but it feels better to play and go in and unpick this thing. The power-ups aren't quite as bizarre or anything like that. I think the controls are slightly snappier. Certainly the way you kind of read the level, I guess, as you go through it, it's a bit clearer, the sort of ways you should be going. Not always. There's an impressive bit of verticality to it as well.
All the best Sonic games seem to have that.
You can take
good verticality in them.
You can take alternative routes and stuff like that.
Makes a huge difference to them.
It really does. And like the Sonic 1 on the Master System didn't quite have that. It felt a lot more linear and a lot more flat. You actually can collect some of the rings when you get hit and stuff like that. It's I don't think it's got checkpoints, but the levels are quite short, and I think by that point most people had a good read on what was expected of them in a Sonic game and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't really notice them being missing that much. You do still get levels like where I started getting tripped up when I was playing it through, where you have like a paraglider.
So that's on the image, isn't it, on the front of the box?
Yeah,
that is in the air.
And occasionally, like trying to work out the controls for that when you don't have the manual could be frustrating. But some of the level layouts where you like might have to try and get your paraglider through a tunnel or work out a way of getting around it could be a little bit tricky, but like, not impossible. But the point is that even when it was starting to get frustrating, it felt like a bit more of a more confident game. Like it knew what it was doing, and it was okay with presenting that to you. All that said, I don't remember there being a paraglider in Sonic 2 on the Mega Drive.
No.
So did some more digging. It's a completely different game.
It's
so you start in underground zone.
Oh, cool.
And stuff like that, and you have these paragliders and think like they just made a completely different game. It came out slightly before Sonic 2 on the Mega Drive. So this is the debut of Tails.
Just trying to look up.
It's not much in it, but it was basically developed like in parallel at best, if not slightly ahead of it. And so I think that helped. Weirdly, I think it helped because it feels more confident. It feels more like it's more at home on the system and all that kind of stuff. I had really good fun with it.
Great.
They both look great. They both sound great. Sonic 1 is a little bit
made by a musical composer in his family, basically his little sister.
A little bit rough around the edges. But on the flip side, Sonic 2 was definitely the one where I had the bigger bugs, but I think it was the more ambitious game. But neither of them are a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. You can have fun with both of them. If I was going to pick one, Sonic 2 wins out by a way bigger margin than I thought. I came in here like with a couple of scores in mind, but now the more I'm talking, the more I'm like, actually, I think I need to tweak that a little bit.
Yeah.
I think, what do I think? Sonic 2, if I was able to get through more of it before I was talking about it here, I would, and I could be confident that it maintained that level of quality all the way through, I would be giving it an 8.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I'm going to give it a 7. And then Sonic 1, I was originally going to give a 6, but I'm thinking maybe a 5.
A bit more workmanlike.
Yeah, a little. Like it's absolutely fine. Like there is nothing inherently wrong with it. It's not broken, but it just doesn't quite feel right. And when you're playing it and you're having to make these leaps of faith or wondering if you can get up the next slight incline, like that's where you start to lose a bit of the momentum with it.
Yeah, which is never good for a Sonic game.
Well, exactly. I guess that's ultimately my point.
I think that that sounds like a really fair score. We always maintain that 5 out of 10 is like the precipice of a recommendation or not, and it sounds like you're kind of there with that really, and especially with Sonic 2 on the Master System sounding like the more accomplished game. By at least a few points there. So
I think if you woke up Christmas morning and Sonic 1 was under the tree, you're not going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
However, next year you woke up and Sonic 2 was under your tree and you play it, I think it's going to be really difficult to go back to it.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, that's kind of the same on the Sega Mega Drive as well, though, with those two games. That is in the, like, everybody always says, why would you... everybody and me, they always says, why would you bother going back to Sonic 1? Like, as in, apart from if you wanted to play Sonic 1, but if you want to play a good Sonic game, go straight to 2. Do you know what I mean?
But then I suppose to go full circle to what we were saying about sequels and all that kind of stuff. That's what I was about to
ask, yeah.
This is, I think, the Sonic 2 here is what you want from a good sequel. Like, Sonic 1 on the Master System is a really good blueprint for what you can do, especially when you don't have a games company and you've offered to make someone a Sonic game. And then Sonic 2 was someone turning up that knew a thing or two and just went and was really confident with it and made some interesting decisions. And I don't mean interesting in like inverted commas. I mean genuinely engaging. Great couple of games.
No, cool. That's awesome. I've just come up with a good subtitle for the pod. Sequel Samey, sequel Lamey, ? There we go. I'm going to put it in there, so keep your eye out for that.
Possibly awful.
Yeah. Possibly awful. That's also a good subtitle for the podcast.
Possibly.
In general.
Feels like a review.
Yeah, no, well, after that first 8 minutes, it was really pretty bumpy getting in there, so,
I don't know. My favourite review that we've ever had was still, it's better than silence.
Yeah.
I will take that.
Yeah, no,
better than
good.
silence in quotes.
That's not bad.
Absolutely. I'll stick that on a t-shirt.
I know. Imagine just like someone sitting in a silent room, and accidentally the podcast just trips onto some sort of vinyl, like as in like the needle just drops onto it, and it's just like, you're like, oh, this is all right. Yeah, it's better than what I was just listening to. Cool. So the last thing I want to ask, right, and this is driven completely by Locoroco, and it's a games with shoulder buttons. Sounds a bit weird.
Yeah.
As in, so I could find I was like, I wanted to ask a question. What's the best sort of game driven by use of shoulder buttons that you think you might have played? Now, I'm going to let you off the hook also to not answer that question because I couldn't really find many examples. That is in where it's like Locoroco, where it's like if you didn't have that concept of it, it'd be a completely different game. Like, isn't it? It's just like that is the Billy Bob basic of that game, and it makes it really good. And I was like, so therefore, what are its competitors? And there don't seem to be any that I could come across.
Presumably, you're not thinking like driving games or first-person shooters.
Well, yes. I think I would probably extend it to that almost in a way, because the next thing I could think of where you're affected in the gameplay with those shoulder buttons as much is a similar sort of Sony franchise, not similar, but like in like PSP, in that era, is Wipeout, like as in using your air brakes with, your LNR and stuff. And that feels like one of those games where I think what I'm trying to get to here is that if you didn't use them as much in these games, that is in, it would be a different game entirely. That is in, so I just thought I'd just put a sprawling thought out there, and it might even be one of the listeners kind of think of something, I don't know, but I was just like, I don't think there's any game out there that I kind of go, this is the best shoulder button game I've ever played, which is a ridiculous thing to say.
Now you mention it, like we definitely take them for granted nowadays, don't we? Because there was a time, having played 2 Master System games where they were non-existent, and now I'm sitting here thinking, but we would have played racing games in a time before analog shoulder buttons, where you could like delicately, gauge your accelerating or your braking. So I mean, there's those in my book that are candidates. The other ones that come to mind would be obviously your first-person shooters where you can aim down your sight with one and shoot with the other. But then you scale that up to like the PS5 where you get the different like resistances and the triggers depending on what you're doing. But of all of that kind of neck of the woods, the one that comes to mind weirdly quickly is like Halo. Where you can shoot with different buttons and stuff like that, and if you want to fire both guns in each hand at the same time, you can, or one after the other. So
when they called that Combat Evolved, they weren't even bragging. They were just like, no, it is now. It is, because you think like a few years before that with like Medal of Honor, and I think you have to like hold R1 to go into some sort of aiming mode, but you're still in first person. There's no view, there's no zoom or anything. Like
kind of like GoldenEye.
We
were doing the GoldenEye thing for ages, weren't we?
It moves like, and then that's how you get your sort of axis to move, and it's really shit. Like, it's awful. But like, I have really fond memories of Medal of Honor, but actually the control system is horrendous. So yeah, it was just something that, it might come up for the next few weeks. Someone will go, oh yeah, this is what I put forward for that. But I was just like, yeah, there's nothing out there that I think, oh, this is the quintessential shoulder button game, apart from Locoroco. I'm going to put it up there as that's the thing. So
I can't help but think that there'll be like a port of arcade games or something like that that has like an unusual control scheme on the cabinet that actually ended up translating quite well to shoulder buttons or something like that. I'm thinking of like the ones with the paddle, kind of like breakout kind of stuff or something like that. It might, I don't know. I'm waving my trigger fingers at you here, really unhelpfully. Oh my god!
Like, they were moving so quickly.
Years of practice, I guess.
Jesus, like they took an eye out. So yeah, I guess with that shrug of our shoulder buttons, we will leave you alone this week. So yeah, thanks for listening.
Cheers.
Bye.